Hello, everyone. This is Scott Nelson from the Austrian Economic Center in Vienna, Austria. And I'm continuing with our free market roadshow, State of the Country. I'm very pleased to be joined by Razi Ginzberg, founder and director of the Ayn Rand Center in London. So welcome, Razi. How are you doing?
I'm doing as well as I can be, Scott. How are you?
I'm doing all right. Maybe a little bit better. I mean, I'm kind of enjoying my time to sort of think and read and that sort of thing. So the quarantine so far, I'm not suffering from cabin fever yet, but we'll see. So yeah, I've talked to a few other people about various countries and regions, seeing what it looks like in different places and that sort of thing. And now we come to the UK. So if you could can you give me like an overview of what's the current state of the UK right now in terms of if you happen to know any figures like numbers of infected, deaths, that sort of thing, what's the situation?
So I don't remember off the top of my head the number of people infected. I think it's in the region of 20,000 or so, and that's confirmed cases, of course. But
Right.
I think they're doing something like 6 or 7 thousand tests a day. So the actual figures, are probably much higher.
Right.
Definitely much higher. And deaths, I know the number for today was 368, which was a massive surge from the days before. I mean, it's the highest number so far. So the previous peak was about 4 days ago, and there were maybe some reasons for optimism because it seemed to be at least slowing. But yeah, now the numbers are up again.
Okay, fair enough. And how's the health system taking it? I mean, are there enough beds and that sort of thing? Are the hospitals doing all right?
I think from what I understand from the news, and I try to, I know people who have stopped watching and reading the news altogether. I'm
Sure.
not quite there, but I try not to. I try to limit my news consumption. Uh, but yeah, I think they are reaching that point, and they are opening, new sort of temporary hospitals, so to cope with that. But it's getting to that point where it's going to be difficult to cope.
Okay, fair enough, fair enough. And when we turn to the issue of the economy and that sort of thing, I mean, what's it looking like right now in the UK? Have there been a lot of layoffs? Is unemployment kind of going through the roof? And what's the government doing to sort of offset that? I mean, have you got tax deferrals, stuff like that? I know that some countries, I think, what is it, Denmark and Norway and Sweden, for example, the government will step in and pay a certain percentage of workers' salaries if they would otherwise have been laid off and whatnot. Do we have comparable things going on in the UK?
Yeah, yeah. So the government is paying 80% of people's salaries if they can't work. For example, if it's a business that had to temporarily shut down,
Okay.
then they will pay their 80% of their salary. And there are similar packages for self-employed, and there is a massive stimulus program that's meant to, uh, I guess, meant to help. Whether or not that's going to be the result, we'll see.
Okay, fair enough. Has there been any, in the case of the UK now, has there been any appreciable difference, or what are people saying as a result of the fact that Boris Johnson himself has tested positive for COVID-19?
Um, well, I don't want to take Twitter as an indication of anything, because on Twitter you always get the real nastiness, and of course
Sure.
there were people there who were celebrating that and somehow tying it into his specific policies. But the thing with the UK, and we were talking about this in a Zoom call that the Ayn Rand Center had last week with Jonathan Hoenig and Gloria Alvarez, that Gloria gave examples of a few countries and different ways in which they're handling it. And I mentioned that the UK seems to be taking an all of the above approach. So
Okay.
there was a very different approach at the beginning, and uh, the government uh, didn't want to have a lockdown, and then as time went by, as the numbers grew, they decided to go with that.
Okay. What's the lockdown like, anyways, in the UK right now? Like, I know, like, for example, here in Vienna, Austria, it's been in effect since the 16th of March, so the last couple of weeks. It'll probably go at least till the end of April or so. More or less, the only time, we can leave our homes is if we want to, go for a run or go bike around and that sort of thing. Go to the supermarket, of course, essential shopping and whatnot. But otherwise, if you happen to be around other people in the supermarket, they always recommend at least 1 meter sort of distance from other people, and that's basically the extent of it. And as a matter of fact, as of tomorrow, when we go to supermarkets, we're going to also have to start wearing one of those face masks. Is it more or less the same thing in the UK right now?
I don't think it's quite there. Again, if you watch the news, they will show you the worst of everything, and I
Yeah.
think I saw there was this drone video of a couple walking their dog, and there were they showed on the news police stopping cars and asking the drivers where they were going. I don't know to what extent that is the case. I think it's not as bad as is usually the case. It's not as bad as the news tells you. But on the other hand, I have to say I have only gone as far as the supermarket nearby, which is a 3-minute walk from my building. So and I haven't been stopped by the police. So
Okay, fair enough. Well, that's good, thankfully. How are the people actually? How's the population in general reacting to the quarantine measures? I mean, do you get the sense that there's widespread support for it, or do you have a lot of people who are kind of up in arms on social media, for example, about infringements on civil liberties and all that sort of stuff? I mean, you mentioned the drone example, and I know that there are some people who are starting to talk a lot more now about the sort of surveillance measures and the dangers of these sorts of things being held over after the emergency is all over.
yeah, I think the drone video didn't go over too well, but in general, in general there is support for the quarantine, and there was a lot of criticism of Boris and the government for not doing it earlier. So yeah, yeah, and there's not much concern about civil liberties, and a few journalists who have raised these questions have been uh, attacked again on social media. So I don't know how widespread that opinion is in the public, but these are not voices that you hear a lot. The voices that criticize the measures taken by the government.
Okay, fair enough, fair enough. Look, I don't want to take too much more of your time, Razi. So maybe just by way of conclusion, do you have any last words to say on this topic? Like, would you care to venture any sort of predictions in the case of the UK as we go further down the road, or at least anything maybe that people who are watching the UK should keep an eye out for?
Well, I'm afraid to predict, but I've been told that you should always end these things with, with on an optimistic note, and I can't actually do that. I mean, I think there are infringements on civil liberties. There is widespread support. That's what really is scary to me. There's not much debate on the topic, uh, and you know, politicians aren't usually too keen on giving up power. I don't think many people go into politics to give up power. So I'm not optimistic, but I am hopeful that I'm wrong. Uh, and those of us fighting for freedom here will do our best to make sure that I am wrong.
That sounds like an excellent note on which to end. That is Razi Ginzberg, founder and director of the Ayn Rand Center in London. Thank you very much for your time, Razi.
Thanks.